What's up? Welcome to another episode of T-Dub's Film Room, brought to you by the barn, Auburn.com. And we've got the preview for Texas A&M and Auburn coming right up. All right, quick reminder, Barn 20, get you 20% off. You can see rowback.com. They've got some Ryder Cup gear. Looks pretty sweet, so make sure you go check that out, Barn 20, and get 20% off. All right, so we're getting right to it. We're going to jump right into X-factors first. We're going to start with Texas A&M, and then, of course, once we go through the X-factors, obviously we'll break down a lot of film while we do that, and then we'll get into the matchups, and then I'll get my score prediction, and we'll get out of here. So on the Texas A&M side, again, 5 X-factors. I always call this out. This is not the best players. This is the 5 guys who I think, and they're going to be good players, obviously, but the 5 guys I think their performance directly impacts the outcome of this game. So number 1 for Texas A&M. Now look, number 7 is Concepcion. He's very good. But I think the number 1 X factor for this game is number 1, Mario Craver, Mississippi State transfer. He's a pretty local kid, I think, out of the Birmingham area here. So this is a huge play in the game versus Notre Dame. And again, shout out for the All-22 here. Just incredible that we have this. But you see what he can do after the catch. There's a lot of examples of this, okay? And I'm going to use a few different examples, but a couple of things I wanted to kind of highlight here. Obviously, his ability after the catch, he's a smaller guy, listed at 5'9", 165, and so he's very dynamic, agile, quick, and he is very, very good after the catch, and he can break tackles and make big plays. But the scheme here is very good and sound as well, because essentially we're kind of in the boundary again. We've talked a lot about that, but we're moving to the field. Okay, well at this point, typically you'll spin just like the Notre Dame defense does here. One safety goes back, one safety goes down, and then at this point he's kind of the flat defender here. Well, the tough part about this is I'm the flat defender. Obviously, a lot of times this could be a bubble or something like that, but we have a tight end kind of leaking out in the flat as well, so the linebacker here has to do a good job, which he has. But at this point, the safety's screaming up because, a lot of times that can be a quick kind of deal here. And then, so now we've got a kind of a runoff, probably a post, the wheel behind it, and then the flat here, kind of a 3-level flood. And that's just, that's good stuff, and that's really hard. And they got a matchup with a safety, a personnel matchup with this play here because of the pre-snap motion and good play design. So I wanted to highlight that. But Mario Craver, I'm going to show you a couple more plays. All right, one thing you'll notice is a lot of pre-snap motion with Texas A&M. Colin Klein, the former quarterback, but here the pre-snap motion is very deliberate. It's a 3rd down play, I believe, and this is just straight up. It's going to give us a couple of things. It's going to give us defense ID, DID. We know it's man-to-man because the defender runs across, I guess it's 2nd down, runs across with the motion. All right, so we know it's man-to-man. Well, then they snap it basically in the stack to give him a free release, and then he's just going to run an option route, I believe. At this point, he's just going to kind of, hit this thing inside, and that's a big play. Again, if that's Sly Smith, that's going to be a tough cover. So we better be paying attention to where Mario Craver is at all times. All right, here's another example. This time, Mario Craver motioning in from the number 1 position. And then, again, I think they have some options here. If it's man-to-man, he's probably going to whip this thing out. If it's zone like it kind of is, he can just set it down in the slot there in the hole. So that's another good example there. All right, and then here, and this is kind of a general thing as well. This is Mario Craver. He's going to have a big play, but this is something, and I would imagine A&M will probably use some tempo here, being at home a lot more on Saturday. We can't just let them have these kind of easy ones. So, if they're lining up trips to the field, especially like with a nub tight end opposite, something like that, we have got to get aligned, especially, like I say, if they're going tempo. We can't allow this. I mean, this is too easy. Like, if we're going to have this much space between, our safety and the number 3 receiver, then the guy over number 2 better be absolutely dogging him if it looks like it could be a screen. This is too easy. Mario Craver's too good after the catch. Just, can't allow it. All right, my number 2 player for A&M X-factor is going to be Marcel Reed. Again, not being cute, kind of like last week here. Talking a little bit about their scheme as well. They take shots. They freaking take play-action bomb shots. And our defensive guys in some of the interviews this week, they've already called it out. They are going to max protect, play action, have multiple people in here, 2 tight end set, same kind of stuff we do as well. And they're going to run double moves, All right, kind of the corner, that, out and up kind of deal with the deep crosser. They hit this one. I'm going to show you a couple more. All right, again, another play action shot, 2 tight end set, so you just got to be on alert. Now, here, all right, Conception wins at the bottom of the screen down here. He wins. It looks like Marcel pulls his eyes down for a second, does a really good job if you watch, just kind of, keeping his feet hot, moving in the pocket, and then finding the deep crosser late. So he's got options on this one, and he does a pretty good job of just, look, I know if I give myself time here, I'm going to have guys open down the field with a single high structure here from the defense. So, again, just another example of shots. I got a couple more. All right, this looks pretty similar to some stuff we did here, right? 2 tight end set, play action shot. You're hitting the go ball. All right. And look, Marcel misses it. Marcel has a few misses. They take so many shots that, he's going to miss on a couple. But, again, we're going to take shots. Marcel's going to let it rip, and we just got to be prepared for it. All right, now the next play, 3rd and long, one thing that Colin Klein does pretty consistently as a play caller is if it's 3rd and long, man, we're not just going to hand it off and punt. Like, we're going to try to get the first down, even on 3rd and long. We'll talk about their offensive line in a second. They do a pretty good job, obviously, holding up here. But Marcel will throw it into trouble. There's a few of these dangerous throws that I kind of clipped here that we'll get to in a second. But, this guy ain't open at all, and he pretty much stares him down once he gets to the top of the drop. So he kind of just wanted this. But, it's a single high. It looks like man-to-man, essentially. So you've got a free safety, and then you've also kind of got a robber here, I believe, who's just reading the eyes, doing a good job. So, they got 3 guys over here covering this deep crosser. Marcel lets it rip anyway. All right, here's another example. Now, this is the last drive of the game-winning drive, so I understand it's a little bit different situation. There's more urgency here. But, some of these he is kind of getting away with, I would call these some dangerous throws, but he's hitting some of them. Again, last drive, so I get it. But, this is what Notre Dame is doing schematically here is definitely something that we're going to do. Now, I don't love funneling him to the field intentionally, and that's definitely what they're doing. You can just watch. Like, they're intentionally diving inside and they have the spy over the top, which is good stuff. But this safety right here could have ended the game for Notre Dame if he has just a little bit more trust, I think, in what his eyes are seeing. So he's good right here. That was a game ender. So pretty tough for Marcel. But what does he do? All right, essentially the last play of the game here. Game's on line, 4th down. Same deal pretty much schematically for Notre Dame. He finds a one-on-one matchup with a big tight end. Takes the shot. You have to in that situation. Again, just watch the scheme here and kind of the idea and the plan from Notre Dame. They're actually going to funnel him to the field. Again, interesting. They got the spy, and he's just going to throw it up for his guy and let him win. So Marcel, will he, take shots? Yes. Will they use some quarterback run game? Yes. Will he put the ball in harm's way? Probably. But is he clutch? Absolutely. All right, my number 3 X factor for Texas A&M is probably a guy who doesn't honestly play enough snaps to really warrant this. But number 17, big Albert Regis. I think he's 6'1", 320-ish. So a true nose tackle. This is a really good rep. This is one of the better reps that I've seen watching, this game and then the UTSA game pretty closely. We'll get to it in a second, and I'll kind of show you. I think he's really important because I don't see a lot of, awesome run defenders on their defensive front. I know that may sound kind of crazy, but that's just what I see. This is a great rep from a nose, taking on a center. Obviously, he's getting help here from the slot defender, and that's a really good job by him. But, and I don't think he's going to dominate Connor Lew or anything like that, but I think he's probably their best guy in terms of run defense on the front. All right, for example here's a, kind of a probably some kind of mint front here. You kind of have more 4 eyes and then the nose. And you have number 5 here doing a good job getting off the block and causing some havoc, and he's pretty good. But they have a guy right here who's 265 pounds, and then they have this defensive end who's like 290. If they get in this front, and this is not like a 3rd down at all, I think this is 1st down actually. If they get in this front, we're going to have to pound their face in. All right, now here's another example of just some stuff that they do. They'll get in an even front, and they'll do some gap exchanging, and they'll bring this backer in the A-gap as well. Here's Regis right here. This is a horrible gap exchange, all right, and a pretty easy touchdown. We'll see the end zone view in a second. And I got like a few different examples of this exact gap exchange. So again, not huge guys in here, and then this is bigger number 17 Regis. They're going to gap exchange the defensive end and the tackle, and then he's going to come in the A gap. They have a nice play called here, almost like a wham block from the tight end, and it's just wide open. So, again, Regis, I'm saying, is an X factor because if he plays really well, that can help them. But if he's not playing as well, I think we can take advantage of some stuff. I think this is the same type of look here because it's kind of funny. It's literally the next play on defense. They call the same exact scheme. They're going to do the gap exchange up here, I think, to the boundary. Yep, there it is. And then the same kind of pressure from the mic. I think the back doesn't trust it as much. We can see it from the end zone view. But this is a lot of stuff that A&M will do. We'll show it from the passing standpoint and pass protection as well in a second. I think they try to do some of this stuff, and they're just not near as good as Oklahoma was. Absolutely, there's a huge difference, in my opinion, from looking at like the front sevens between A&M and Oklahoma. So there's the gap exchange. I think he could have hit that crease right there. But yeah, I think number 17 is going to be really important because he's one of their better run defenders on the front. Here's a pretty good example. Regis here is kind of the shade nose, but you've got a nice combo block up here by the right guard in the center. And this is something that, I'm kind of highlighting going, look, man, Jeremiah Wright, Connor Lew working this one. I like our matchup there quite a bit. 11, again, he's not a huge guy, 290-ish, and he's playing the 3 technique here. Again, you got Connor Lew, Jeremiah Wright, our right tackle one-on-one with Cassius Howell, good player. But, you could see here Jeremiah Wright and Connor Lew being able to work up, Connor Lew being able to work up to the linebacker here. Again, a smaller linebacker here, Torian York, good player. But, yeah, Jeremiah Wright could dominate that dude and spring us for a couple of big runs, absolutely. All right, so my number 4 X factor for A&M is going to be actually number 4, the corner at the top of the screen who's not targeted on this play, but I just wanted to kind of point this out. This is what A&M does, at least against Notre Dame. I don't know if they're going to try this or be able to, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I don't know if they're going to try it. But essentially what they do is they have a field corner and a boundary corner. And the boundary corner, who is my number 4 X factor, Will Lee, number 4, he's pressing up quite a bit. Now, he can bail at the snap and go to like a cover 3 zone and stuff like that, but a lot of times he is locked up man-to-man. And again, I don't know if they're going to do that Saturday. I very much hope they do. But there's a couple of plays here kind of back-to-back. So this is a nice little field rollout with the comeback here. The receiver does a good job. Notre Dame does not have guys like Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons. I think they have some possession guys that maybe are more similar, like Horatio Fields and maybe where Perry Thompson is at this point as well. But just so you see kind of what they're doing schematically and then the personnel. But number 4, Will Lee, we'll look at him in a second since he's the boundary corner and he'll be facing off against Cam Coleman quite a bit, and they like to press him up at least against Notre Dame. I think that's going to be a huge matchup. All right, to demonstrate that, this is the very next play, and again, all right, we switch sides of the field. Now the ball's on the right hash. They switch corners, right? So now number 2 is to the field again, who plays off, and then you have number 4 pressed up in here in the boundary. Well, Notre Dame, sees this. It's man-to-man, and the receiver's going to do a pretty good job. Push vertical and then sit it down on the hitch. So you can see that. Good release, bang. And that is quite a bit of separation, and I'm just telling you right now, if they do this, we ought to be just going hitch and go and hitch and go just all the time. If they don't give this guy help, Cam Coleman needs to eat him up all day long. All right, here's one again. Number 4 pressed up, top of the screen. You got Cam Coleman. He's going to try to jam him. Nah. Hit him on the vertical shot. Cam Coleman, go get it, right? And this guy's pretty good. Like, that's a pretty big receiver. But I'm just telling you, there ain't no way they can leave that dude pressed up in the boundary on Cam Coleman with no safety help all day long. We're going to take these shots, and I'm pretty sure, I like our chances on that kind of stuff. Here's a decent little look while we got the end zone view of some of their pressure packages and stuff like that. But again, it doesn't take a lot of time to, that's just a quick 3 hitch, let it go to Cam Coleman. I like that matchup for Auburn. All right, my number 5 X factor for Texas A&M is number 9, Cassius Howell. He's their leading, sack guy. He's their Keyron Crawford sort of, buck outside linebacker, edge rusher type guy. I'm pointing this out because this is pretty interesting. So obviously I don't see us getting to a lot of wildcat, but in red zone going in and short yardage situations, they do something kind of interesting with him. He is absolutely, positively selling out, basically just to condense gaps and just shoot at this angle and just kind of tighten all this up. And you can see, so like basically, if you have some tight ends out here that's going to try to, block down on him or block straight up on him, they're going to lose. Like, he's going to beat you to this point. He's too quick. He's too good. I'm going to show you a couple examples as well. All right, here you go. Basically, same look. You can see Cassius Howell, number 9 right here. Just bang. All right, so it's going to be very hard on that tight end. Now, this is the second time the tight end has seen this, so I think they're a little bit more prepared. He does his best job as he could, is not letting number 9 cross his face. He's doing this as best as he could, but you can see, that's what they're doing down here. And I'm pretty sure, and you can see it very well from the end zone, I'm pretty sure the very next 2 plays is basically the same setup with Notre Dame kind of trying to punch this in. All right, so we'll take a look at this. I think schematically Auburn needs to take advantage of this. I don't know exactly how they're lining him up because I'll show you in a second with a shift. But basically, man, and I have some ideas of what you could do. I mean, I'll wait, I guess, till after the game to see if they do something, similar to what I'm thinking. But you can see if they run away from it, all right, if they want to run away from where 9 is, he's going to be able to chase that down so hard because he doesn't have any kind of contain responsibility here on the backside. Again, same deal here. Here's number 9. Okay, that same kind of angular penetration. And then I think, yeah, here we go. This shift is what's interesting to me. All right, so this is part of maybe what we could expect Auburn to play around with a little bit. He's going to the 2 tight end side. All right, and so if you shift your guys, like the tight ends where he's going to try to line up, that can cause a lot of at least, momentary confusion and distraction at the very least for how they're kind of playing these short yardage and red zone opportunities. All right, so those are my 5 X factors for Texas A&M. Let's talk about the 5 X factors for Auburn in this matchup here. Number 1 for me is going to be Keyron Crawford, and the reason is I think Keyron Crawford specifically. Of course, you'll have Keldrick out here. You'll have Amaris out here. Jared Smith, who's really coming along, true freshman. But I think Keyron Crawford has the potential to absolutely dominate a couple of these tackles. So we watched the matchup with both of these guys on this particular play. All right, they both lose. Both tackles lose. And I don't think either one of these guys from Notre Dame, like 44, shows up and is active. I don't know that either one of them are like All-American caliber guys. I'm not saying Keyron Crawford is. But consistently, I'm looking at the tackles, and they're losing. And I think on the edges specifically, Auburn can really dominate that matchup quite a bit. So Keyron Crawford for me is a guy who I think has the potential of having an absolutely monster game on Saturday. All right, number 2 X factor for Auburn in my mind is going to be Caleb Harris, mostly because so far this year, Caleb Harris has been our guy that we really depend on as actually the deep level safety, which is kind of interesting at this point. And maybe that's just, coincidence of things that I've seen where we're kind of rotating based on motions and things like that. But a lot of times when I've been looking at the film, Caleb Harris seems to be the guy in the back end. Now, this is actually not the exact play that I was hoping for, but let's see, 341. Okay. Oh, well, I guess so. My point with this is that although Colin Klein has some good schematic stuff, he'll get a little fancy on his play action shot kind of blocking schemes and stuff like that. So with the play action shots that we know they're going to take, I think the key here is going to be, and this is an RPO, but they do some of this stuff as well. The key here is going to be, can our front dominate so much, especially shooting in when they're doing some of this pulling to influence our defensive linemen? Can they go hit Marcel Reed as soon as possible to not allow the time that Marcel Reed needs to hit some of these shot plays? Because I do think Caleb Harris, the best part of his game is not necessarily, deep pass defense down the field. It's coming up in the box and making plays. So for that reason, Caleb Harris is going to be my number 2 X factor because I think he's going to be involved in some downfield shots pretty often. All right, my number 3 X factor for Auburn in this game is going to be Jeremiah Cobb, and that's because I think there's yards to be had against this Texas A&M defense. So a couple of things. We looked at kind of a tight mint front, 3 down front earlier. This is really not that different. You still have Cassius Howell here, and basically instead of 2 middle linebackers, in the box linebackers in these kind of in these A gaps here, you just spin one guy down, and now you basically manufacture a bare front, but you only have one guy on the second level, so you kind of leave yourself susceptible if you're able to get guys doubled and then climbed up to the only guy there. So I like the pre-snap motion. Now you have the numbers to this side, and then you kind of have, a little outside zone or mid zone, whatever you want to call that, but that's a, 6-yard gain on first down. I think, and there's a few examples here with this bare front that I think we need to look at, and they shift to it pre-snap, all right? They shift the tight end over to gain leverage on this left side, and I really like that because you can see kind of the extra hats on, the away side of the play, All right, but everybody's just doing a good job. Like I said, number 5, like I don't think they have a nose besides 17 that's really that good at run defense. Here's a couple more examples. Okay, here's the we're going to shift to the bare front again. This time 17, Regis, one of my X factors is in the game here. We're going to shift, and then we're going to kind of run that outside zone, but we do kind of lock number 9 on the backside just in case we want to do a quarterback run or something like that. But that time was defended a little bit better. All right, now here's a big opportunity, and this kind of goes for Jeremiah Cobb, but potentially Jackson Arnold as well. Let me actually go to the full all 22 view so we can see this a little better. So I believe we get, or no, yeah, we got a 2x2 look here. All right, and here's what's important. Okay, we'll let this thing play out a little bit. We watch this thing. Let's call this a read option. All right, I'm pretty sure it is. All right, well, in this case, because it's 2x2, this overhang player, I mean, it's man-to-man essentially, right? So if you read this guy correctly, okay, and in this case he keeps it, but this could be Jackson Arnold. I like the matchup here a lot better with Jackson Arnold and his feet versus Notre Dame's quarterback whose name escapes me. He's not super athletic, but I think maybe in that case, Jackson may be able to make a play. But when we see the end zone view of this in just a second, I'll show you how impactful this type of look could be for Jeremiah Cobb actually, because I think the hash cut is what I would call it, could be there off of this read option if they do stay in a lot of this bare front. Now, they're coming off a bye week, so they could have a lot of different stuff. I'm sure we'll hear that win or lose that, they threw some stuff at us that we, didn't really have a look for it in practice. So again, the bare front, all right, we're going to read number 9. Watch this open up, okay? Mason Murphy, if he does a good enough job on his guy, we can double the nose, who's going to flow with, kind of with the play a little bit, and then Jeremiah Wright work up to the backer, and then watch this develop. This is why I call this the hash cut. If, okay, Jeremiah Cobb can kind of put his foot in the ground, bang, that is a real hash cut. That is a backside cut off that read option that can be there against that bare front. If Jackson Arnold sells this well enough, or if number 9 doesn't make a really great play. But I think either way, if they give us that bare front, especially with a 2x2 where the overhang has to respect the receiver to that side, there's nobody left here, and it's a one-on-one with a safety if Jeremiah Cobb gets that cut. So I think he could have a really big day on Saturday, so he's my number 3 X factor. All right, my number 4 X factor is Jackson Arnold, okay? And I'm going to show you this clip because I'm trying to show you what I'm seeing here. And what I'm seeing is, I'm telling you, Texas A&M's front is not even comparable to what Oklahoma's front was bringing in terms of stunts and angles and personnel, like David Stone and those guys. Texas A&M does not have people like that on this front. Okay, I'm not saying they're bad, but like, watch this stunt, this tackle and twist. All right. This is nothing, all right, compared to what Oklahoma was doing in terms of like just intensity and strength and power, and even the scheme, like this long step. And I've got a couple more examples I'm not really going to bother showing you, but every time I see this tackle and twist that they do it the same way. So this is where they're coaching it. It's this long step. They're trying to fake them out. It just doesn't look like it's going to be that hard for us to protect. So I'm saying that, with regards to Jackson Arnold, I don't think he's going to face anything like what he faced against Oklahoma last Saturday. I think that should give him some comfort. I think his protection will be there. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to do some stuff on offense and kind of get him comfortable. So number 4, Jackson Arnold, obviously he's going to be really important to Auburn's success on Saturday. All right, and then number 5 for me is going to be Cam Coleman. At the end of the day, I know we've already seen this, but like, they can't do this. If they do this, like, they're going to be in serious, serious trouble. But I'm showing this again because I just hope they do, because Cam Coleman will eat all day long, and I will be very excited to watch. So number 5 X factor for me for Auburn, Cam Coleman. All right, so trying to keep this one a little bit shorter, a little bit sweeter, hopefully. Let's get right to the matchups, and then I'll tell you who I think is going to win. As we do, all right, we'll start with Auburn. We'll look at Auburn's offensive line versus Texas A&M's defensive line, their defensive front. I'm giving that advantage to Auburn. I know I gave the advantage to Auburn last week versus Oklahoma, and we gave up 9 sacks or so, I think the official statistic there. But as Hugh said, like half of those or so were on the passing, the quarterback receiver part as well, whether that's Jackson holding on too long, not trusting, or the receivers not being exactly where they need to be when they need to be there, that kind of thing. So I think our offensive line still did pretty well, and really in this game, I think our offensive line should have a really nice advantage in the run game. I expect us to get back to some of the things we were doing against Baylor. Like it or not, I think we're going to try to chew up some clock. get some first downs, keep our defense off the field, that kind of game plan. So I'm giving the advantage to Auburn there in the front. Our running backs versus their linebackers, I'm giving their linebackers the edge. I like Scooby Williams. I like Torian York and some of those guys. Our running backs, again, like Jeremiah Cobb, really great run against Oklahoma last week. But until him or Austin or somebody shows the ability to win consistently on like one-on-one in the open field and dominate a game, I'm probably going to continue to kind of pick the other team's linebackers. So I'll give A&M the edge on that one. Quarterbacks, receivers versus their DBs. We looked at it. I don't think their corners are world beaters, and I think Cam Coleman, if they're going to play him pressed up in the boundary, is going to have a huge day. Singleton, Malcolm Simmons, we lost Horatio Fields, but we still have Perry Thompson and some of those guys there, so I still like that matchup for Auburn. And schematically, I actually like Auburn's scheme here. We looked at it a little bit, like some of these stunts and some of the things that A&M's doing. I just don't see anything that's going to be that big of a problem. Again, they're coming off a bye week. They'll have some new stuff, so we'll see. But I think we're going to be okay schematically. So that's how I see it going in terms of Auburn's offense versus A&M's defense. All right, and then on the other side, we got A&M's offensive line versus Auburn's defensive front. Again, that's going to be one where I pretty consistently probably pick Auburn's defensive front, and I think rightfully so. I think Kieron Crawford, Keldrick Falk, Amaris Williams, Jared Smith, I think Bobby Travis, Malik Blockton, like all these guys, Jay Hardy, are going to continue to get better and play well. So I'm picking Auburn defensive front there. Running back versus linebackers, again, kind of the same deal. Like I'm going to pretty consistently probably favor the other team's running backs at this point. DeMarcus Riddick, Xavier Atkins. Like Xavier Atkins is playing really good ball, obviously. But, I still like their running back core, Le'Veon Moss and, I'm forgetting some of their names. But they have like 4 pretty freaking good running backs. They just don't – that's not really their offensive identity as far as like establishing the run. I think they do token runs to – set up play actions, and then they have RPOs, and then they set up the quarterback run and all that kind of stuff too. But I'm giving A&M's running back group the edge there. And then quarterback and receivers versus DBs, I'm still going to give it to Marcel Reed, Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver. Those guys are problems for sure. And Marcel Reed can hit you with his arm and his legs, obviously. So although I thought Auburn's defensive backs played a lot better against Oklahoma, I'm going to give that matchup to A&M. And then on the scheme side, I wrote down AU on this one, so I gave it to Durkin over Colin Klein. But after thinking about it, man, like Colin Klein's doing some good stuff, and they stress you pretty hard. They stress you vertically, and they run a lot of like, I wouldn't necessarily even say like double move route, but like like a post corner off of a play action shot. With maybe a post on the other side and that kind of stuff. Like they do some pretty good stuff, crossers and posts. And then I like their, some of their RPO and screen game. They make it look pretty easy, not super complicated. So I'm giving this schematic matchup with A&M's offense versus Auburn's defense a push. I respect what they do schematically, and obviously I respect what Durkin does schematically as well. So at the end of the day, we're in a similar situation as we were last week, where I think Auburn is better in the trenches on both sides. Now, obviously, Oklahoma's front defensively was nasty, okay? And they wouldn't stop doing crazy stuff all game long, like against the run, gap exchange, but actually doing it well. The stunts and the twist in the passing game as well. But A&M will try to do some of that stuff. It is just not even close to being the same. So I actually do feel comfortable with saying that our offensive line and defensive line should win their matchups. And again, man, like that's most important. And at the end of the day, last week, even with everything that happened, okay, Auburn was in a situation where they took a lead in the fourth quarter after a drive with 6 minutes left to go. And I think a lot of that did have to do with consistently throughout the game, the offensive front doing decently well, the defensive front doing phenomenal. And so that's how I see that going. And so again, I'm going to pick Auburn in this matchup. Obviously, nobody's picking Auburn. And I'm an Auburn fan, so that probably has a lot to do with it. But, there's something about the team and the group and even Hugh. I just think there's leadership that's there, and I think there's confidence that's there. They just, probably feel like they should have just beaten a team that's, a playoff team for sure on the road. I think that maybe proved to themselves that they can get this thing done. So I'm going to pick Auburn 27-24. I expect a very close game again. And we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to those bounces and, the calls and like some of those things that you can't necessarily, quantify and break down on tape. Like Auburn's just going to need some things to bounce their way, man, and stay out of penalty trouble, and special teams has to be better. But If it's just kind of the normal football stuff, I really like Auburn's matchup here. I actually really like Auburn's matchup, but I know, things happen that are kind of crazy. But that's how I see it going. Obviously, we'll come back after the game next week with a game recap. And thank you for watching. Keep it locked. BarnAuburn.com, T-Dubs Film Room. We'll see you next time.